things over to Natalie Dubois from Environmental Incentives. She's going to be our MC for today. So we're super excited for that and we've got a pretty packed and fun agenda. So I'm going to, I guess I'll share my screen too. But Natalie, can you kick us off?
Great. Yeah. So hi, everyone. Welcome. We do have a packed agenda today. We're starting off with the initiative showcase. And I think, Caroline, you're going to share the screen, correct?
Yes. Yep.
The link is also in the notes if you need that. And we will be giving everybody a max of 5 minutes per initiative. So I'll give a little reminder when you're close to your time. So who are we kicking off with?
I think we are kicking off with, and maybe just one note too for people, as it is important that you have the link to the slideshow, because after each slot or after each initiative, there's a questions spot. So if we run out of time for verbal questions, you can just take one of these little squares or rectangles and fill them in, and the leads will make sure that they respond to your question. So, okay, I will now go ahead and share my screen. And I think we are starting with the climate folks.
Great. Climate,
all right.
the floor. Wonderful.
Thank you, Navi and Caroline.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hit, yeah, sorry. I'm new to Zoom. There we go.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Varsha Suresh, and I'm one of the members who work as a part of the CMP Climate Guidance Working Group. And over the last couple of years, we've been able to do a lot of exciting work as it relates to climate change, especially climate resilient conservation practice. You may be familiar with the guide we published a couple of years ago. And so we're excited to share what we've been up to over the last year. If you go to the next slide, you'll get to see all the amazing folks who've been involved at various stages of our work. If you move to the next slide. So how did our work relate to the CMP plan? So the first click will tell you that we develop new guidance and tools. And I'll be sharing more about that in a minute. And then the other thing we do is share good examples, which has been a large portion of what we try to develop in 2022. And then another thing we do is the collaborative learning and facilitate information flow through a lot of the learning sessions that we've been developing. So that's just a quick orientation how we relate to CMP. So over the last year, we've been working on a couple of different products and projects. The first one is this building blocks for climate resilient situation model. And so we started out the year by kind of surveying our community to see what would they be interested in, what would they need. And we got a lot of feedback that would be great to have some generic examples that would act as great starters when working with project teams. And so we then did a quick review of what might be the key ecosystems to start with. And so if you just tap a couple of times, you'll see that the slide deck has a link to the database we created of situation model chains, and that show how to incorporate climate change in your situation model. And so we used a couple of different ecosystems, and we drew on both the experience of our community as well as a deep dive into the literature to see what might be the relationship between factors for that particular ecosystem and how to depict different types of climate change. And we try to stick close to the threat taxonomy as well. And so if you open that slide deck link, you'll be able to see and use those examples. Also, I'd like to point that in the notes on each slide, you will find all of the evidence and papers linked for each of the models. And so I think that would help you kind of figure out why we depict a certain model a certain way. And of course, this is very much a living document, and we hope to continue updating it and get feedback on it as well. So this is the first product. The second one is we were able to host a couple of different learning sessions last year, a couple of taps, and you'll see that we did have sessions that related to building that slide deck as well. And then we went into like case studies. There was one about the South Caucasus region. And then we also had some particular themes, like we had a session about gender, equity, and social inclusion as it relates to climate resilience, as well as identifying climate adaptation strategies for your conservation projects. And then we were also lucky enough to find folks who helped us translate the climate guide into Spanish, making it more accessible to more folks. And so all of this information can be found on our website and our workspace. And I think I just put the link to that in the chat. And so that is what we did over the last year. And then in terms of what we're going to do moving forward, we are, as I mentioned, looking for folks to kind of review that building blocks database that we developed and get some feedback. So if you're interested in checking it out and giving us comments, do add your name to the chat, and my colleague Ryan will make note of that. And then also we're hoping to develop training slides to incorporate into the CCNet coach slide deck, so that coaches have these decks when they work with the teams to start incorporating climate into the situation models beyond, using the things we used to, like just say climate change in a box or have it in a group box, but kind of going even deeper than that. And then we're hoping to continue facilitating the learning sessions. And so we're always looking for topics that might interest the community, as well as would be relevant just in terms of climate resilience. So if you're curious how to get involved in all of this amazing work, you can participate in the learning sessions when we share information about that. If you're applying any part of the guidance, do reach out to us. We're always looking for great examples. And then lastly, like I mentioned, you can reach out to us if you're interested in contributing to that deck of building blocks, or if you'd like to just review it. So you can find all this information on our workspace. And if you just want to chat or you want to get involved, you can contact Marsha or myself, and our emails are right there. So I hope that I didn't go super fast there. Just a little concerned about time. If you have any questions, you can add it to this deck and I will make sure to follow up with you. Just put your name in there so I just know who to follow up. Right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. We will put questions in the deck for Barsha to keep moving along. And thank you. All right, next up, CMP.
Natalie, if we do end up having under 5 minutes, we could take questions verbally. Just to.
Okay, we were at 7, so we can take one quick question if you want.
Nope, let's keep going.
Okay.
Thanks.
Right, do we know who's presenting the nature-based solutions?
This should be Jess or Ray. Actually, I wonder if they're on the call. I did not see their names. Okay, no one's stepping forward, so I think we will skip them, but maybe just, I haven't read this, but I will kind of quickly, I guess, just let you all know that there was in 2021 and 2022, Tierra Mar in Australia did some work for work under the Collaborative Learning Initiative and looked at nature-based solutions. And so they've based, or let me see, let's see what they have here. This is the group that was involved with that work. We also have some partners from environmental incentives, I think, who got more involved in 2022. If anyone from EI is on here and wants to jump in, do feel free to. So part of this work involved developing or kind of bringing together people who were interested in nature-based solutions and developing a community of practice. Here's a link in the deck to the products. And I'm not really even going to try to, since I don't know this and wasn't planning to present it, I think maybe just, I do recall from this work, one of the things that they the conclusion that they came to was that the conservation standards are really well set up for thinking about and looking at nature-based solutions. We have a nice framework with our situation models and our theories of change, and looking at ecosystem services as well as human well-being benefits, and also thinking about kind of biophysical effects. So I'm going to move on from here. And
Caroline, it seems
yes.
as though the first slide has a recording of them going through this presentation.
Oh, well, how about that? Huh. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I was not aware of that. Oh, I have to share with sound. Just a moment. I'm going to stop sharing. Share. Okay. Let's see if this works.
Hi, this is Ray Nice from TRMR. This is our final presentation on our project, CMP Nature-Based Solutions Community of Practice, and expanding on NBS cooperative learning. The aim was collaborative cross-.
Are people hearing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Cross-organisational learning on how NBS is being applied across sectors and its links with the conservation standards. This is our team. TRMR is a small NGO, but we have a major interest in the application of nature-based solutions in Australia and the Pacific. So our project sought to do two major activities. One is develop the community of practice for nature-based solutions, which would provide an opportunity for collaborative and constructive dialogue on nature-based solutions. We focused on emerging and pressing topics that impact the work of CMP members. We had 3 virtual meetings, July, September and November, in 2 different hemispheres. We had the link to our workspace there below. The second activity was to promote cross-organisational learning on NBS, exploring emerging NBS activity from other sectors, such as the development, infrastructure, financial services area, following NBS projects of various scale to understand lessons learned, exploring opportunities for alignment and complementarity of the NBS standard and the conservation standards. We conducted interviews and consolidated information gathered through the community of practice. We produced a final report, other products and guidance based on the findings of this project. These are our major conclusions. Nature-based solutions continues to be a rapidly expanding field of study and practical application across the world, but major challenges remain. In order to achieve successful NBS outcomes, conservation-based NGOs will need to adopt a multi-sector systems approach framed around a thorough understanding of human and environmental forces that operate at scale. Thirdly, the open standards for the practice of nature conservation 4.0 provide a robust framework for developing NBS projects when guided by the IUCN criteria for nature-based solutions. Our recommendations. Firstly, the nature-based solutions community of practice could be combined with one or more of the other learning initiative working groups for greater efficiency. Secondly, a number of simple guidance products could be created to assist CMP members in development of NBS and incorporated into future versions of the conservation standards. Thirdly, CMP should consider establishing an ongoing dialogue with IUCN about the further development of NBS. On behalf of TRMR, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to work with the CMP and Foundation of Success on this nature-based solutions project.
Great, much better to have them explain it. Thank you, Erica, for pointing that out. Let's see. I'm going to get back out of here and go to the next initiative. Okay. Is this Charles?
Yep.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can.
Okay, I'm having some connection issues, so if you can't hear me properly, let me know and I'll close down my camera.
Great.
Okay. So yes, this is my project on alignment between the conservation standards and corporate ESG frameworks. The title of the project changed a couple of times, so that's the latest one. So through the conservation standards, as we know, we've been working for the last 20 years to develop a common language, guidelines, and tools to tackle nature loss. Now it seems like the corporate sector is trying to fill a gap or a void. Can everyone put themselves on mute? Thank you. And there's numerous frameworks that are currently being developed by various coalitions to increase consistency in language, process, information between existing nature-focused and climate-related frameworks to foster synergies between the public and private sector actions. Okay. So the vision for this project, if you can stay on the same slide.
Sorry.
Or the previous one. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Is that we build off and align with each other to send a single unified message for all the actors. So whether you're a not-for-profit, private business, government agencies, or a funder, so that we act and report in the same way on both nature loss and climate change. So right now there's a pretty big number of initiatives that are kind of popping up on the radar, and there's a need for alignment. And I think part of the conclusions from the previous initiative point to the same direction, that we need some better alignment. So the purpose of this project was more specifically to create alignment, or to explore opportunities for alignment between the conservation standards and corporate nature-related frameworks. Okay, next slide. So the team, thank you to the people that worked to advise me on this project. Next slide. So in the first year of the project, we focused on creating awareness between the SPTN and the conservation measures or conservation standards community. In the second year of the project, the objectives were to further or expand the partnership between the SPTN and the CMP, so that we develop efficiencies across our networks and build off and align with each other. A couple of outcomes. So we promoted an official partnership between CMP and SPTN, which is the Science-Based Target Network. Sorry for the acronym. We submitted several feedback to corporate sustainability frameworks that are in development, so that they become aware of the conservation standards. We submitted numerous value propositions about the conservation standards and Mirati, again, to organizations or partnerships working on nature-related frameworks. We developed a Mirati project in CAML, which contains guidance on how to align the conservation standards and corporate nature-related frameworks. We delivered a webinar in partnership with the SPTN, and we supported the work of other working groups. Next slide. So I'm not going to obviously present all the outcomes of this project, but just to show you a couple of things. And I do want to mention that at the end of the month, there is a 1-hour webinar on this subject that you can attend if you want to learn more. So one way to, as you all know, to create alignment is through language. So language differences between frameworks that have different audiences are inevitable. But we should strive to align language where feasible. So this would increase the clarity of each of our frameworks by using terms that are commonly used and well-defined. It would help users navigate between frameworks and facilitate communications and collaborations. So the use of a common language will be particularly relevant where several organizations are planning actions in the same geographic or thematic scope. So what we want to avoid is having many organizations, or even inside one organization, having people that use different language in the same landscape because they're using different frameworks, whether they're using the CS or the SPTN framework, working with with corporations. Next slide, please. So we developed
Charles, you have
similar
about
to-
a minute left.
Cool,
Okay.
thank you.
Great.
So we developed language equivalencies between other nature-related frameworks. We noted that there are many similarities between terms used in different nature-related frameworks, but there are also numerous discrepancies where different terms are being used to describe the same thing, or where the same terms do not have the same definition or same meaning. Next slide. So one way that we can align is through our conceptual models and classification systems. Next slide. So many of the corporate frameworks are built on the IPBES global assessments, which are conceptually close, but again, use a different language than the conservation standards. So again, we're trying to develop some alignment between the frameworks. Next slide. Another way to realize alignment is through processes and tools. Next slide. So again, we developed guidelines where we translated the SBTN guidance into conservation standards like language. We outlined where there was alignment or discrepancies and how Marathi can be used to support the SBTN process. So one major discrepancy or one major way where the conservation standards can help the SBTN is that the SBTN recognizes that the lack of evidence or prior experience may make it difficult to assess the probability that a specific action will succeed. They recommend that companies try multiple approaches, set intermediate objectives that consider the time lags between actions, results, impacts, and the status of biodiversity. They encourage the use of adaptive management, monitoring, evaluation, learning approaches, but nowhere do they mention results chains, and they don't provide much guidance on how to do all of those nice things. And this is really where the conservation standards can support that. Next slide and final slide. So I developed some recommendations both for CMP and for the SBTN, and similar to the nature-based solution recommendations. I recommend that we create a working group whose primary goal would be to increase alignment with other nature-related frameworks, whether that's the SBTN, IUCN, all that jazz. You can register to the webinar, visit our workspace, and that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Charles. I think we'll keep, I'm reminding everybody, you can please put your questions in the slide if you have any, and we'll keep moving on for time to the next one, which is the later conservation standards.
Yeah, and this one is actually me. So this is an initiative that to recognize that not all conservation teams are entering the cycle at the same step or with the same level of engagement or interest or ability to dive deeper. And so there, for many years, we've talked about how we need kind of easier ways or lighter ways for people to start to engage with the conservation standards. So our group has been focused on developing accessible tools, approaches, and resources to engage and support conservation teams. This is our esteemed team here, and we've included not just these individuals, but also CMP and CCNet, the whole conservation standards community. We've had several webinars and kind of working sessions where people have provided us a lot of insight and valuable input that's helped shape the direction of these products. So this hasn't been unveiled yet, but this is where things fit into kind of an evolving but draft CMP plan for the coming years. And what we're really focused on is providing the high quality guidance and tools, making them accessible. And in particular, this result down here that the guidance materials are inclusive and accessible for a diverse range of audiences. And ultimately hoping we get to greater adoption and improved conservation outcomes. In terms of products, there's kind of a suite of things here that's part of this lighter CS initiative. We have a cookbook. I'm going to explain these in a little bit more detail, but a cookbook which basically kind of tells you how, if you want to do, if you have a certain scenario, what are the things that we suggest you do. This lays out the different scenarios. It's just kind of another visual to illustrate the key things to be thinking about. And then we have examples and resources, and I'll go into each of these. They're all available through this link down here on the CS website, the resource library. And there's also an intro video. So this is going to explain a lot of the things that I explain right now. So in terms of the cookbook, we set it up as recipe cards for different scenarios. So if you're trying to just do the basics, these are the things that we think you should make sure that you do. And maybe just a clarification, this is not, lighter CS does not replace the conservation standards. It is, it is a kind of a tool to support the conservation standards. So it is, the best is to do everything that's in the conservation standards, but it's kind of a recognition that not all teams can always do that. So if you are working on full cycle basics, then these are some ingredients that you might need. And just, so if you click on any of these, then it takes you into a little bit more depth on some different options. And then for each option, there's a how-to and tips sheet. Related to all of this is these are, the full cycle basics right here. This is just another way of visualizing it. It's of what, of all these different things that could possibly be included, what we thought were the priorities. And I'm going to keep on going here. The other thing that's really cool and where we're focusing our emphasis right now is this example and resources document. So for each of the tip sheets, the how-to tip sheets, there's a little button here where you can click examples and resources, and it will link over and get you a bunch of different templates, tools, resources for different options. And so you can then say, okay, I want to know more, and I actually need a spreadsheet. And you can click over here, and then you can click on these links, and you'll actually get some templates that you can use and adapt. In terms of what's next, we've already done this. We developed a proposal for a learning initiative in 2023, really to work on that resources and examples document that I just showed you. And we hosted a webinar. Between now and November, we're going to be adding more examples and resources and building out potentially some tip sheets that we did not build out in the first round. And we will be having other consultations with the community. And we are aiming to have our final product in by December, get this reviewed by the guidance committee, and then do an official launch. And in terms of how to get involved, we'd love to hear, we're kind of drawing on our knowledge and our experience, but I'm sure a lot of you have examples and resources that might be useful to include in that document. So we'd love to hear about those. We'd love you to test the cookbook. Let us know what you think. Promote and share these widely. There's a link to our workspace, and you can always contact me to get involved.
Thanks, Caroline. Does anyone have a question for Caroline? Erica, I saw you put a comment in the slide deck if you want to share that.
Oh, I was just, it's something that Ash and I talked about when we had a little small group during one of the last webinars, and just if you want to look at the connection between the products developed for this learning initiative and how people are adapting them to use for organizational adoption. We're hoping to do a lot of that.
Great. Any other questions? feel free to unmute. I can take a quick one. All right. And our next topic is conservation standards adoption, a change management strategy.
Thank you. Next slide. So the purpose of this project is to provide support, guidance, material, and tools for key individuals aiming to improve conservation planning practices across their organization through the adoption of the conservation standards. Okay. Can you stay on the same slide, please? Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we all want our organizations to be more effective. We all believe in the value of the conservation standards, but sometimes it's hard to convince other people. So we want to provide some guidance so that anyone can play a role in making change happen in your organization. So the target audience for this project is for individuals that already know about the benefits of the conservation standards and that are seeking support to spread its adoption to other projects across their organization. So here the term adoption is used as a simple and generic term for both operationalization and institutionalization, which are a bit of a mouthful. So we're always stressing through this project that the goal here is not necessarily to adopt the conservation standards or to adopt Marathi. It's really to improve conservation practices and find how the conservation standards and Marathi can help you get there. Next slide. So lots of people have contributed to this initiative over the years. So a big thank you to all of those. Next slide. So again, our vision is to try and make organizational-wide adoption a manageable endeavor for everyone. So we can, it can be pretty daunting as an exercise, but we want to make sure that anyone can achieve this in their own way. So everyone has a role to play, and we want to support those people. Next slide, please. So in the first year of the project, we learned that many organizations are eager to document and share their experience. But many organizations would be more confident adopting the conservation standards if they had access to lessons learned from other organizations. We try to create bridges between organizations through this project. We've also learned that it's pretty difficult to develop a clear roadmap that would apply to all different organizations at various levels of CS adoption, given the differences in history, context, and organizational culture. So we're trying to create some guidance that would apply to any situation without necessarily telling each of them, this is what you should be doing first and next and third, because this is going to vary widely between organizations. For the second year of the project, around 40 people joined the CS adoption support group. Many group meetings were held, and participants appreciate having the opportunity to troubleshoot with their peers on CS adoption. We've had some project participants that developed and share Marathi projects that they're using to plan and track CS adoption within their organization. 5 organizations have tested, validated, and promoted products that were developed as part of this project. Thank you to the International Crane Foundation, the Endangered Wildlife Trust, and Pantera, who have agreed to participate in the development of a short promotional video, which will be released shortly. And we've also started migrating the conservation capability maturity model developed by Annette to a COBOL toolbox survey so that we can collect information and share across the network. So this is going to be finished in the 3rd year of the project, which was recently approved. Next slide, please. So just some more information on the CS adoption support group. So I encourage you all to join if you are a person trying to influence other people in your organization. It's a good opportunity to just kind of meet with other people without a clear agenda. So you just kind of show up, and if you have an issue, people are going to be there to help you brainstorm and find solutions. Next slide, please. So for the next year of the project, as I said, we are going to release the CS adoption promotional video, which is meant to just provide a quick overview of what it means to work towards adoption of the conservation standards across the organization. We are working on a diagram showing information hubs where people can find information about the conservation standards. So it's a bit easier to find and to get to the information you want relatively quickly without getting lost in the different websites. As I said, we're going to finish the migration of the CMM tool to a survey, an online survey application. We're going to finalize the change management theory of change and develop some CS adoption resources with the, sorry, I don't remember the name of the previous project, Caroline, the quick.
The lighter CS initiative.
Yes. So we're going to provide resources to the CS or the lighter CS initiative, specifically about CS adoption. And we're also going to finalize a document on roles and responsibilities for operationalization or adoption of the conservation standard. So I'll provide the link to the form that you can fill to join the CS adoption working group. And no, Richard, there is no alcohol provided. Maybe virtual alcohol.
Bring your own.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Great.
Cheryl. We have time for a quick verbal question if there is one. Next up, conservation standards, effectiveness and impact.
That's me. Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Elton. The Conservation Standards Effectiveness and Impact Initiative is led by myself and Sheila O'Connor. Sheila, feel free to pop in if you want to add anything to this presentation. This initiative has been running since 2021. We are currently in our second year, which has just been extended slightly over the next couple of months. We are aiming to identify indicators, tools, and methods to help teams monitor the effectiveness, the efficiency, and the impact of applying the conservation standards. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this is our team at the moment. Please feel free to pop your name into the questions box at the end if you'd like to join our team or contribute towards this initiative. But just a shout out and thank you to everyone who has already contributed to our work. Next slide. So essentially the core of what we're trying to do is to assess the assumption that if organizations adopt good conservation practice, then that leads to more agile and effective conservation. So we are aiming to identify what that actually means. So we split this assumption out and we developed a theory of change which might exist between those two results to describe what are those core groups of results we would expect to see happen and how do we measure those things and how do we help teams measure and assess those particular things. And this is what that theory of change looks like. It's been through a number of iterations, but this is the most updated version. So you'll notice that there are sort of 5 groups of results around good planning, good implementation, conservation outcomes, adaptive management, and good project support. So we're identifying a set of indicators, methods, and tools that can help teams to measure these things and assess themselves along this theory of change. All of that information, all of the sort of resources are stored within a Google site. So what we're calling the Conservation Standards Effectiveness and Impact Portal. So I'll put the link to that in the chat in a second. But basically, all of our resources are stored within that one Google site. And within that, we have a workbook of indicators. So basically a list of indicators with descriptions and methodologies and tools for how teams might measure across those 5 various themes. And then right at the end, there's a monitoring protocol, which is currently in draft format. It has not been completed yet, but that's what we're working on over the next couple of months. So the monitoring protocol is specifically designed for CMP organizations that might want to assess their efficiency, effectiveness, and impact after the adoption of the conservation standards. But you can also use it if you are using any sort of adaptive management framework. It doesn't necessarily have to be the conservation standards, and you don't necessarily have to be a CMP member organization to use the protocol. But essentially what the hope is that we would be able to consolidate some of this data together so that CMP as an organization can assess its own effectiveness and the effectiveness of those organizations within it. Next slide, please. These are just a couple of screenshots to show you what that Google site looks like. So there's a number of descriptions describing how you might use it, how you might go about using the workbook of indicators. And as I mentioned, each of those sets of indicators are split into those groups of results that we laid out in our theories of change. So those little colored boxes are the same as what you would see within that theory of change. And again, the monitoring protocol is there in draft format on the website, but we are currently revising and updating it. It's in development, and over the course of the next couple of weeks, we should be finalizing that monitoring protocol. And then we're going to be working with a couple CMP member organizations to test that monitoring protocol, update and improve it. And ideally, we want to align it with CMP's new strategic plan as well. So I know this slide has lots of text on it. I'm not going to read through all of our ongoing questions, but what we're aiming to do within the next few months of 2023 and expanding this initiative into the rest of the year, we really want to think about what these ongoing questions are and how we can answer those ongoing questions. So I'll leave those for you to have a look at. We also recognize that there have been a consortium of tools and resources that have been developed, but dissemination of those tools and resources might be lacking a little bit. So we really want to harmonize those. We want to think about supporting teams to actually use these tools and resources, in what context they might use it, who might use it within the team, and how they might go about that. So we really want to make sure that our resources are disseminated as well as possible, and that they don't just live in the workspace, but no one uses them. And then ideally, we want to think a little bit about how we can merge with some of the stuff that Charles was talking about in the previous presentation. So a lot of that adoption work feeds quite nicely into the effectiveness initiative as well. And we're thinking about how we can expand this work into a sort of long-term working group in merging those two initiatives together. And that is pretty much it from me, I think.
Great, thank you, Claire. Are there any very quick questions? Otherwise, we have 2 more presentations left, I think, and we'll move along if there aren't any to pop in the chat.
And there was a question about the previous.
Oh, thank you, Ryan.
Charles, you want to take that question?
Sorry, I didn't see the
It
question.
says, regarding the previous presentation on CS adoption initiative, will there be any summary report that shows how the work or feedback of participating organizations was used, for example, to refine the tools?
Yes, so we've been funded for another year, and that's what we're hoping to do, is to kind of wrap up the project and follow up with those organizations that have provided feedback. So yes.
Great, thank you. So next speaker will be on Policy Impact Initiative.
Thanks, Natalie. This is Nico Bönisch. I'm based in Europe, work with FOS in Europe, and I'm here with my colleague Lisa. We're starting up the Policy Impact collaborative learning effort now, basically as we speak, and are very excited about that. What we're aiming for is, as many of us, many organizations obviously work on policy engagement strategies, and we keep struggling with assessing what policy impact actually looks like on different parts of the theory of change around that. On the one hand, on once you have a policy, what's actually the impact on the ground of policies, but then also if we engage with policy and try to improve it, what's actually the impact or the outcome of that. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to follow the approach that we at FOS, together with Conservation Evidence, have recently been using in the Conservation Learning Initiative funded by the MAVA Foundation, to collect, assess, and compile both published but also evidence from practice, to actually get a handle of that and understand better what are really the mechanisms of policy engagement, how do these strategies work, what are the key pathways behind that, and obviously also what is their impact. Next slide, please. So the team consists at this point of Lisa and myself from FOS in Europe, and then Will Morgan from Conservation Evidence in Cambridge in the UK. And then we're very happy that we have a good team of people on our core team to help us think and move forward, which is John, Natalie, and Will, all on this call. So thanks for that. And we're also inviting others who are interested to join, who have been thinking quite a bit about policy engagement, policy impact in the past, and who would be curious and also interested to contribute with their thinking and experience. That would be much appreciated. Next slide, please. We see our contribution to the CMP strategic plan somewhere here on the right-hand side of this theory of change, of this pathway, that is about results of reviews captured in standard theories of change, and then standard theories of change are accessed and used by project teams, leading to teams improving their work and also practitioners implementing evidence-based conservation. It's not only about the standard theories of change. That's the starting point of our work, where we want to understand the pathways of policy engagement better. But obviously, we're going to build on that with learning questions, assumptions we want to test with evidence, and actually collecting and compiling the evidence and making that accessible to practitioners. So it's really a focus on that far right of that chain here. And I'm handing over to Lisa for process and also what's next for the initiative now.
Yes, thank you, Nico, and hi all. So our process is based on the 5 steps for evidence-based learning and conservation on the right, and we expect this year to go through the first 3 steps of the model and then compile the work done so far. So for our initiative, this means that we will start by defining the learning topic. With the core team, we will have to agree on the timeline, roles, process, and what we consider the essential components of policy impact. And also, very importantly, we need to develop a common understanding of terms and definitions, including the term policy, to establish the scope of our project. And in step 2, we will jointly develop policy engagement pathways in a form of 1 or more theories of change. And we will also formulate learning questions and assumptions that are anchored in these TOCs to test with the evidence that we are going to collect in step 3. When collecting evidence, we distinguish between 2 complementary groups of evidence: published evidence and evidence from practice. And with evidence from practice, we mean evidence that partners to this initiative, the wider network, or other actors have at their disposal and are, of course, willing to share with us. And then finally, we will compile the results of this year and share our findings through a webinar for the CMP members. And we also want to include the theories of change and their related learning questions and assumptions in Mirati, share Camel. So that's the process for this year. Next slide, please. So what will we be doing in the coming months? We will, as said, we will make a start by producing a summary of the learning topic, the process, the roles, the timeline, and we will then have a kickoff meeting with the core team to discuss all these points and also review and refine the learning topic. And next, we will start building one or more theories of change for policy engagement, and again, have a core team session to improve these and agree on them eventually. So we would be very happy to see more organizations getting involved in this initiative, and you can do this in 3 ways. You can join our core team, and as Nico said, then you will support the implementation team in setting up the framework at the beginning of the process, and you will serve as a sounding board for the implementation over the course of the project. You could also get involved through providing evidence, data, information, or stories regarding policy engagement strategies that you or your organization has acquired over the years. But it could also be that you don't have this evidence at your disposal, but you might be able to link us to other organizations or relevant actors that do have such evidence. So we would also be happy if you could help us find evidence providers. So feel free to contact us if you feel like you can contribute. And I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico and Lisa. So that we give the last group enough time, why don't we put questions in the chat and we'll come back if we have time afterwards. Or in the slide. Thank you. All right, next. Great, thanks.
Me again, sorry. So this initiative is super simple. It's an update of the current version 2 of the IUCN CMP threats and actions classifications. I am co-leading this initiative with Nick Solowski. Next slide, please. This is our current core team. Many of them are Canadian, as you might notice from their core team list. So what we're looking for at the moment is a sort of broader diversity of people to join our core team. So if you are interested in this update to the threats and actions classifications, please put your name in the questions box and I'll contact you about joining our team if you'd like to. We've also got a number of consultants that have added so much value to this work, Michelle and David, and we are working very closely with some members of IUCN to make sure that this update is consolidated between CMP and IUCN. Next slide, please. Canadians are definitely not good enough. We just need a sort of broader global diversity if possible, but thanks, Charles. So as you can see, this action is a specific activity within CMP's strategic plan. It's a really important part of the plan to publish and revise these classification systems. So it's within goal 2, sorry. So historically, the first version of the actions and threats classifications were completed in 2008. And that first version was a combined collaborative attempt between IUCN and CMP. And then version 2 sort of diverged a little bit, where IUCN weren't able to adopt all of the changes because of the issues between all of their red listing systems and having multiple versions of these classifications. So IUCN chose not to adopt version 2 of the classifications. But what we're really trying to do now is streamline things and think of how we can make sure we have migration pathways in place to allow our teams to easily adopt version 3 and make sure that their database systems can update automatically as well. So we are really aiming to consolidate this version 3 with IUCN's efforts as well. These classification systems really do help teams to understand, organize, and share information. It's one of the most important CMP products, and using these classifications or taxonomies, practitioners really can describe their problems and describe the solutions they're facing and compare across geographic regions and really speak to each other with regards to conservation action and conservation threats. So these are the working drafts of version 3. So we're working on Google Sheets online. We are holding virtual sessions to go through the current versions, discuss them, vote on preliminary changes. And we are bringing in information from the Marathi Share database. So there's a lot, there's about 7,200 I think it's actually 72,000 records in Marathi Share, which we are pulling in, analyzing to really understand what types of threats teams have listed within Marathi Share. We are also trawling through the literature database to bring in lessons learned, experiences, and horizon scanning from the scientific database. And we're looking at all of the levels of the classification system. So we are making changes to level 1, level 2, and we're thinking of ways that we can add additional detail to level 3 and potentially level 4 of those classifications. So this initiative was never planned to just be 1 year. We planned right from the beginning that it would take at least 18 months to complete. So we are in year 2 at the moment, and we are continuing to make those changes and updates. And then ideally, we're working on a finalized draft with IUCN. And then the next step is then to beta test those revisions with key stakeholders, so members of CMP and the broader conservation community. And once we've gone through that beta testing revision, we will finalize version 3. And the next step is really important, is to describe those changes between the various versions and set up those crosswalks or migration paths to help teams update their databases and ensure that version 3 is useful and appropriate. And we want to implement a dissemination plan. So it might be a scientific publication as well as a series of webinars to help teams migrate across from the various versions to be able to use version 3 and to just create awareness and make sure that people know that it exists. So please feel free to join our working group, provide your inputs and comments, send us emails if you have any inputs or comments on the current versions of the threats and actions classifications, any issues you've had with them. And you can email myself or Nick with any of this information.